So who should be the next Ireland manager then? Well, as we very well know, Stephen Kenny is no longer the Republic of Ireland senior football manager. It has been, it's done. It's finished. It's over. And look, in the end, I think it is the right decision. I mean, look, I was probably one of the people who really backed Stephen Kenny from the start. Even if you go back on this channel, look back at some of my earlier videos, I even made a video discussing why Stephen Kenny was the right man for Ireland, a couple of years back. But look, the more the time has gone on, the more I think you have to say, in the end, look, I don't think he has been good enough for Ireland. I mean, look, I think he's done some things right. I think implementing a very good progressive style of play that's been very much adopted across all levels throughout the Republic of Ireland team, from the under-20s, the under-18s, obviously up into the senior team as well. And obviously he took over Ireland in a massive transitional, sort of phase for the FAI, and it hasn't been easy, complete change of guard in terms of players, much younger players coming in. I think I've seen a statistic that he was one of the sort of, he brought in one of the most amount of younger players in his time as Ireland manager. And look, to be fair, I think he had to, he completely had to, because the team who obviously qualified for Euro 2016, that team is done now. That team is finished. He had to bring through younger players. So I think whoever was the manager would have had to done so anyways. But look, I think in the end, results-wise, and even some of the performances haven't been good enough. I mean, not qualifying for the Euros behind France and the Netherlands, I don't think anyone can really complain about Ireland not getting to the Euros ahead of France and the Netherlands. You're talking about two of the best teams in the world right now. And to be fair, not getting in that top two, I think it would have been a miraculous achievement, and it would have been an overachievement if we had have even stuck into the top two. But the performances and the results against Greece in particular, I think, were probably the final straw. And even when you look at Ireland under Stephen Kenny at times, the defeat to Luxembourg, there's been a few other bizarre results in there as well. And look, I think ultimately he just has looked a little bit out of his depth. And I think ultimately Ireland have looked miles off it. And even though at times we have played decent football, at the best of times there's been no structure with it. And the players look like they lacked a lot of confidence at the best of times. So look, I think ultimately it was the right decision. And, as I said before, the style of football that's been implemented through all levels of Irish football, I would like to see continue. And I think it's important for the FAI not to completely rip up the book, because I think if we do that and we do go for someone like Sam Allardyce, Steve Bruce, Neil Warnock, we're talking about going backwards again, to be honest with you. And one thing I would say is that when Martin O'Neill left, Mick McCarthy was there, Irish football was going backwards. I do genuinely believe with the quality of players that is starting to come through now, the likes of your Evan Ferguson, Caoimhin Kelleher, Benny's looked outstanding for Luton in the Premier League. I think there's enough there to make a real fist at getting to the World Cup in 2026. Not going to say we can do it, but there is a chance, and I think the next manager is so important for Ireland. So let's look at the odds then on Odds Checker, and let's have a look at who is most likely to be the next Republic of Ireland manager. So if we have a look right here, we'll see a list of candidates. I've basically picked out about 8 candidates here, going from Lee Carsley all the way down to Damien Duff. Fairly certain one of these guys will become Ireland manager. Lee Carsley, first of all, is the massive favourite. Lee Carsley obviously played for the Republic of Ireland for, I think he made 40 appearances. He's obviously born in Birmingham. He's not, an Irish native as such, but he did qualify for playing for the Republic of Ireland through Cork grandparents, and obviously made 40 appearances, was a part of an Irish team sort of in the 2000s that had so many great players, and Keane, Roy Keane was there. You had so much, so almost sort of like one of the golden generations of Irish players. Obviously, though, he is manager of the England under-21s right now, and of course he was the manager who led England to the European Championships last season, and he's well respected within the coaching scene from what I've heard. He's done tremendous work, academy work with the likes of Birmingham City, Manchester City. He's been a part of Coventry's underage setup as well. So in terms of a youth coach, he's, from what I've heard and from looking at articles and looking at other people speaking, he is regarded as one of the best upcoming young football coaches out there as of today. Now, will Lee Carsley become the manager of Ireland? This is a very interesting one, because yes, obviously he has a huge connection with Ireland, and I think him managing Ireland, I think he would like to manage Ireland one day. I don't think it's, something he would necessarily turn down or turn a blind eye to. But is he going to go and leave what is a very cushy job right now with the England under-21s to go to Ireland, which, has no sort of guarantee to be successful? Like, he could go to Ireland and again, it could be an absolute disaster. All of a sudden, his stock goes down and people start looking at him in a completely different way to the way he is now. Like, for example, Gareth Southgate as England manager right now probably has the Euros next season. After that, I don't think he'll be there after the Euros unless they win the competition. I don't think he'll be manager going into the qualification campaign for 2026. So it opens the door up for another manager. Now, Lee Carsley, to be fair, I think most people and most England fans would say Lee Carsley probably would not be the right option to go and manage England straight away. Do you know that way? Like, I think he would probably need to manage a couple of senior teams first. But look, the precedent has been set because Gareth Southgate was manager of the under-21s and then he went straight up to the senior manager after the whole Sam Allardyce thing happened. So I don't necessarily disagree that Lee Carsley can't become the first team manager of England. So, it could be a possibility that could happen and he might be in the running. He might be in the running when that comes around. And I do think as well, like, especially with how well he's done with the England under-21s, Premier League teams would have a crack with him. I really think that they would. Not a top-level Premier League team, but I think a team in the bottom half of the table would look at Lee Carsley and think he's worth taking a punt on. And, is he willing to give that all up to come into Ireland, which, as we said, do have a lot of great young up-and-coming players right now. And I think Lee Carsley's track record with younger players, working as a youth team coach, would be perfect for Ireland. 100%. As an Irish fan right now, if we could pick someone on this list, Lee Carsley would 100% be the man because he would get the best out of Evan Ferguson. If Kelleher comes back into the side, he'd get the best out of him. You're looking at some other younger players who've started to make the breakthrough in the last couple of seasons as well. You've got other younger players like Andrew Moore and Tom Cannon who could make the breakthrough in the next couple of seasons. I think Lee Carsley would be the perfect man to really get the best out of a whole host of Irish players. But is he going to leave that role? Like, is he going to leave? I just don't see a world in which he leaves because, like, realistically speaking, the Ireland job, it's not, he's a young enough coach. He's 49 years of age. He's still going to be managing, probably for the next 10, 15 years, you would say. The Ireland job is going to probably come up for him again, So, do I see it happening? Do I see Lee Carsley become an Ireland manager? I hope he does, but I just don't see him giving up the England under-21 job. And especially when there could be Premier League jobs. And as I said, he could even be in the running to become the England manager at some point further down the line. So, yeah, I just don't see it happening, to be honest with you. Looking at some other options then, Roy Keane, Chris Hughton, Neil Lennon. Looking at the other options actually on this list sort of further down. So, I suppose just to rule these out, like Damien Duff managing obviously quite well in the Irish Football League at the minute with Shelburne, local club of mine, so I follow them quite well. I think it's too early, I think Ireland can't make this mistake again, similar mistake they made with Stephen Kenny. Let Damien Duff progress as a manager, let him continue what he's doing with Shelburne. I think I wouldn't be against Damien Duff coming in and being manager of the under-20s or, the under-18s or something like that. But I think for him to come in as manager right now, I think is way too soon. And I think we need to be patient with these young managers. But definitely further down the line, I certainly wouldn't be against it, but I think it's way too soon. Gus Poyet, Sam Allardyce, Steve Bruce, Neil Warnock. I mean, for God's sake, like, come on, surely not. Gus Poyet... Again, like all of these managers would be completely against the trend of how Stephen Kenny set Ireland up. Like, don't get me wrong, these managers would make Ireland tough to beat. We'd probably get a couple of results here and there. But, like, realistically, are these really, like, is Sam Allardyce and Gus Poyet, are they really going to be invested in Irish football? I don't think that they will be. And that's one thing I would say about Stephen Kenny. He was invested. He was going to games. I think he did try. He tried his absolute best. But it just, he just wasn't good enough in the end. Gus Poyet and Sam Allardyce, like, that reminds me a bit of, when we were getting cushy managers in, likes of Trapattoni and these lads. I know Trapattoni got us to the Euros, but apart from that, he did fuck all, really. So, yeah, like, Gus Poyet, Sam Allardyce, Steve Bruce, I just don't think are good fits. Neil Warnock as well. Like, you're talking about managers as well who you know, like coming to Ireland it's like a retirement home. Do you know what I mean? And they're only going to be here for 2-3 years. So like at max, you know, and realistically for an international manager, you want to keep them long term. You don't want them to come in for one qualifying campaign and then just completely abandon it. So, and even at that, these managers as well, when you look at their last couple of jobs, have all, you know, things have all kind of gone down. To be fair, I do rate Neil Warnock. He does well at getting teams into the Premier League. I think that's his specialty. You know, championship level football, that's what he's good at. But I just don't think any of them would be good enough for Ireland or even suited to Ireland, to be honest with you. And then you've Roy Keane, Chris Hughton, Neil Lennon. Look, Roy Keane is a very interesting one. Obviously, probably the biggest, you know, Irish footballing legend that anybody can think of. And, you know, I think a lot of people would be in favour for Roy Keane coming in because of his history playing for Ireland. And, you know, he's an absolute icon when it comes to Irish football. Few reasons why I think it won't happen though. First of all, 8 years since he's managed a first team. You'd have to go back to Ipswich Town the last time he managed, and to be fair, that did not go well at all. Multiple reasons for it, like Ipswich were apparently like in the doldrums back then, so, you know, and multiple financial issues. There was multiple managers in charge of Ipswich and they all failed. If we are looking at Roy Keane's management sort of spell, he done a fantastic job with Sunderland, you know, got them promoted. The story behind him getting them promoted as well. He took them over after they were relegated from the Premier League. They were bottom of the Championship. They were in absolute disarray. They were heading closer to relegation than promotion. And he managed to take them on an incredible run and got them promoted as champions. And then obviously kept them up in his first season in the Premier League as well. Like, it's been a long time since that. I think football has changed quite hugely. I don't know if Roy Keane would have the temperament for modern day footballers. His relationship with the FAI has been very strenuous as well down the years. Would he have the patience to come in and be a manager for the next 4 or 5 years? I'm not entirely sure. Would he be fully invested in Irish football? Look, I don't think he can doubt Roy Keane's commitment. I think he would get invested. But at the same time, you know, again, he's in a very cushy role right now as a pundit on Sky Sports. Does he want to give that all up to become Ireland manager? I'm sure for him, it was probably an ambition to become Ireland manager one day. And look, he was second-hand man to Martin O'Neill when, you know, Martin O'Neill was, I suppose, if we're looking at the modern era, probably one of Ireland's best managers, sort of, you know, post-2002. So it's an interesting one. If it happens, you know, I'd be like, okay, he's obviously committed. He's obviously up for it. But again, style of football and everything else, like it'd be hard to know, and it's a massive gamble, in my opinion, a massive gamble. And again, I'm not entirely sure if it happens. Chris Hughton and Neil Lennon, I think, are two of the most obvious ones. Obviously, Chris Hughton, as we know, managed for a long time throughout the Premier League. He's done a great job with Norwich City. He's done quite well with Brighton as well. His teams are very well set up. Again, it would be a bit of a shift from progressive football that we played under Stephen Kenny. We will be going back to a more sort of retractable shell under Chris Hughton. Look, he is a good manager, and if it happens, you know, again, it's not like a blockbuster name. I don't think it's a name that would get Irish football fans off their seat. I don't think it's particularly the best appointment in the world. But look, he's done well, and one thing you would say is that his teams are hard to beat. And, you know, for Ireland, as much as we should continue the football that we play, and look, Chris Hughton, I'm sure, will try and find a balance. It won't be complete low block, every man behind the ball. I'm sure he will try and find the balance. We would be tough to beat going up against better teams, and maybe that would give us a slight opportunity of qualifying for tournaments. But again, it's, you know, I feel like it's one of them. It could be likely. Like, I think Chris Hughton wouldn't turn his nose up to the opportunity. I think Roy Keane and Lee Carsley would have reasons to not become Ireland manager, but I think Chris Hughton, for me, I think if he was offered the role, I think he would take it. So look, he's definitely in the conversation, and certainly it's one that I could see happening. But then we'll move on to Neil Lennon, and to be honest with you, I think this is the man that they will go with as manager, if I'm being honest. I listened to Neil Lennon on Premier Sports during the week. If anyone didn't hear him, he was asked about his interest in becoming Ireland manager, and he said openly he would love to do it. He completely, you know, he said right there and then he would be completely open to become Ireland manager. So we know straight away he has an interest, and if the role came up, he would 100% take it. It's an interesting one with Neil Lennon. You know, if you go back to his time managing Celtic, his first spell was probably one of the most memorable moments for Celtic fans. You think of the win versus Barcelona. You think Celtic had some big competition back then, and Rangers were, this was before Rangers obviously completely, had all their financial troubles and went down multiple divisions, so it was a lot more competitive back then in Scotland, I think. But he done a fantastic job in his first spell. He done really, really well. Celtic were hard to beat, playing great football, beating the likes of Barcelona, getting to the last 16 of the Champions League, the last Scottish team to do so. So I think he would be a fantastic fit for Ireland when you look at that. The worry is, since that first role as Celtic manager, it's not gone well at all. Managed Bolton, didn't go well. Again, Bolton, multiple issues at the time financially. Maybe you could take that into consideration. His second spell as Celtic manager did not go well at all as well. Took over from Brendan Rodgers, and he was the manager when Celtic, unfortunately, did not win the 10 in a row, and Rangers, Stephen Gerrard's Rangers, pipped Celtic to the league title. So it is an interesting one. Again, it's another massive... Look, any manager here is going to be a gamble. I think the only one that I would be very, very confident in is Lee Carsley. And I think Ireland should be, really putting the book at Lee Carsley. What does he want in his contract? How much money does he want? Let's make it happen, because the rest are massive gambles and could very well go wrong very quickly, But look, Neil Lennon, he's passionate about Irish football. He obviously played for Northern Ireland and never played for the Republic, but he's got great connection with Irish football fans, obviously from his time at Celtic. I think he would be well appreciated. I think Irish fans would be very happy for him to come in as manager. It is a massive gamble, though. It is a massive gamble. And again, style of football, he had that style of football at Celtic, but it was very easy to do that when you're playing Motherwell, St. Patrick's. And so, yeah, look, I think it will be one of the front four: Lee Carsley, Roy Keane, Chris Hughton, Neil Lennon. For me, I think the best option is Lee Carsley, without question. He would be the man I would go for. But, again, is he available? I don't think he is. So after that, out of the available options, you're probably looking at Neil Lennon, as the best pick there. I do think Chris Hughton, though, would have a setup better. Is he going to be the man to manage Ireland long term? I don't necessarily think that he is. So it's a very, very tough one. It's a very, very tough one. Maybe you look at a situation where you bring Chris Hughton in as senior manager, you bring Damien Duff in as, under 20 manager, under 21 manager, and then you hope that through time, Damien Duff, a bit like what they tried with Mick McCarthy and Stephen Kenny, maybe they do something similar, and when the time is right, then Damien Duff can hopefully become the first team manager. You don't want to stop. You don't want to take away what Damien Duff is doing at Shelbourne right now. And can he do both? I don't think you probably can, to be fair. So, yeah, look, ultimately, I think Lee Carsley would be the number one option. But again, is he going to leave his post as England under 21 manager? I just don't think he will. Roy Keane, it's such an unknown with Roy Keane. If you catch him on a good day, he might accept it, but he's the type of man that could come in for Ireland manager and leave after a couple of months. He is that type of a guy, unfortunately. And then Chris Hughton or Neil Lennon are the two obvious candidates. The rest there, like Sam Allardyce, Steve Bruce, Neil Warnock. If Ireland do that, we're signing our own death wish, because we are 110% going backwards. We need to try and get the best out of Evan Ferguson, these young lads coming through, because otherwise we'll just go backwards. And we do have players to play good football. Will Smallbone as well, I think, is a good player. Benny, as we've saw with Luton, fantastic dribbler of the ball. I think he lacks end product, but I think he's a player who can make things happen. And, if you get Evan Ferguson as the striker, Benny to play off him, I think we have a potential partnership there. So we'll see what happens. Let me know in the comments down below. Who do you think should be the next Ireland manager? Leave a like, subscribe, all that stuff. My name's Aaron. Speak to you all later.